This video is for those who are wanting to stitch together two parts of a pincushion, a top and a bottom, using their sewing machine. And you would do that for something like this, where you have a piece of woven wool and a piece of cotton, or this is all cotton. You would not use it for something like this. This is felt, and it really has to be finished with hand stitching because the felt is just too bulky to turn. So I'm going to be demonstrating on one that's like this, where I have a bunch of trims and buttons. So this is the side that has the trims and buttons to it. Of course, I have it flipped upside down so that the right side, which is the side with the trims and buttons, is facing the right side of the bottom. So these two sides that are the right sides are going to be the ones that this will be turned inside out. So I want to see the right sides when I'm finished, but while I'm working on it, I want to see the wrong sides. You can see I have pieces of cotton, a lightweight cotton batting on these for stabilizer. So I did that. Of course, the stitching lines go through it. So I did that before I get to this step. Now, I also like to mark the opening, and this is important that you put the opening someplace other than the corners. Now here, because I have the lines of trim going across this way, I don't want to have to hand sew an opening shot across these lines of trim. That's going to be awkward. So I look for a clean space, not near a corner, that doesn't have a bunch of embroidery or anything running through it. I marked the center of that, and then I marked an even amount on either side of the center. It doesn't really have to be an even amount, but it's just easy for me to keep track of. I find that if I have something less than a 2.5 inch opening, I have a very difficult time, reaching my fingers through and getting the thing turned. Now, I'm using a stitch length right now of 2.25. You could use something in the, the 2 to 2.5 range. And I've got a 1/4 inch foot on here. That's not necessary, but it's really helpful to see what you're doing. And with this one, you can see I've got a little bit on one side of it. I'm sorry this is a bit awkward for you to see, but here we go. I'm going to start stitching, and I have a thread that matches the outside of my pincushion. I really don't care what it looks like on the wrong side. If I had this batting on a green pincushion, I'd be using green thread. So I take a couple of stitches and then I backstitch, and I'm just using a regular cotton thread with, I think I've got a size 80 Microtex needle in. Now, as I get close to the corners, of course, I could mark the corners. My 1/4 inch foot has these little marks here, so I can see where I'm at the corner. I backstitch at the corner because if you're going to have a problem, it's going to be at the corner. You're going to put it under some stress when you're doing the rest of the steps. So then I've turned the corner, keep sewing. I'm going to backstitch again at that corner. And of course, I'm pulling my pins out as I get to them so that I don't have to stop because I've wedged a pin into my needle or needle into the pin or something. Now, I find it helpful to sew with something like a stiletto, or you can use a seam ripper, something that has a long point. If you're having trouble pushing all these layers through, and you shouldn't have to shove this really hard to get it through, but it just gives me a way to get nice and close in the work without having to put my finger in there. And, obviously I didn't mark these corners. This is not something where, I'm not working with a plait or something on the outside, so I'm not going to be distressed if this doesn't work out super evenly, if there's a tiny bit of irregularity. So that's what it looks like when you're doing the sewing. I'm going to take this out so I can show the next step. This is what it looks like when I have it all sewn. And you can see what I've done is I have clipped the corners. You always want to get a strong enough pair of scissors. These are the Karen K. Buckley Perfect Scissors. And you want to snip this right across here. And they always tell you, clip it to the corner but not through. You can see I got within like a stitch length of the corner. If I leave a big chunk out here because I'm afraid to cut it too closely, I'm going to have all that wadded up in the corner, which is going to be, it's just going to make it a little bit awkward to get it pretty and stuffed. Now you might want to put some fray check if you're worried that you're, going to overhandle it. You can put some fray check here. It will add a little bit of a layer, but these are not going to be super crispy when they're turned anyway because you've got the batting in it. And I'd rather have them, just look even. So what if these are soft? They're all evenly soft corners, and getting them to look regular is the important part. So now that we've got it stitched and clipped, now you have to turn it. And, there are all kinds of different turning tools. I find the fingers are the best turning tool you have. So, and you can see I just push that inside out, or you can start grabbing a hold of it, with your fingers. And, if you like a turning tool, fine. But, just keep in mind you've got embroidery and trims and buttons. You don't want to destroy those. So, okay, this doesn't look super pretty while you're in the process of doing it. But eventually, now I have it just kind of crudely turned right side out. And so you can see that's the pincushion shape is shaping up. Now you have to take something that's sort of like a soft point, but not a knitting needle, not a pair of scissors. I've got just a basic little chopsticky kind of a tool. It's got to be something that can take the pressure of you pushing on it. And see how I'm kind of, what I'm doing is I'm just turning out the corners all the way. And see how I'm taking my thumbs and just kind of spreading this out a little bit. And when I get to where I've been worrying at one corner too much, I switch to another corner, and then I just come back around because I tend to get a little aggressive with these, and I don't want to just get irritated with them and poke a hole in them. So I just I might go around a couple of times until I get them to where I'm happy with them. Another thing you can use is, this is literally called the purple fang, and it's got this more flat squared end, and it's also got this little hook kind of an end. That's a nice rounded, fairly gentle way. It's not quite as strong as the chopstick, but it's pretty strong. So you can poke that in there and get it turned out a little bit better. Now, some people have the instinct right now, like, oh, I want to get it nice and flat, and they take it to the ironing board. But when you think about it, you're not making something flat. You're making something three-dimensional. So what I do to get this seam looking good is, see, now I'm taking, you can take your chopstick, you can even take the flatter end of the chopstick or of the flat part of the purple fang here. And I run that along the seam to flatten the seam out from the inside, because you don't want it, you're never going to be able to press it really neatly. Well, some people can, but if, to me, I have a hard time getting it to press really neatly here, and I don't really want to squash it down. What I actually want to do is just the opposite. I want this opened up so that I can have it nicely prepared for the stuffing. You can even just kind of coax it along with your fingers. And I know I maybe spent a long time showing the finer points of how to do that, but it's something I find people really struggle with, and it makes a big difference in having just an okay functional pincushion versus having a pretty decorative pincushion. So in another video, I'm going to talk about different ways of stuffing these pincushions and of getting this opening stitch closed.